Did you know Yahshua came and walked so that us, as Israelites, us from the house of David, the line of Judah, Judah's sons and daughters, could run? In John chapter 14, verse 12, we find Yahshua speaking to the disciples. He said, "Very truly, I tell you, whoever believes in me will do the works I have been doing, and they will do even greater things than these, because I am going to the Father." He's telling the disciples they can do all the stuff that he did while he was here and more. There are so many examples of great miracles that were accomplished after Yahshua went back to be with Yahuwah. This one in particular is one of my favorite stories about a great miracle that happened. It is Paul, who originally was Saul, who was a Benjamite. So he was from the house of Judah. I say house of Judah because it is the southern kingdom. So you had Benjamin and you had Judah and you had the Levites down there. So all of that was considered Judah. So here we find Paul and about 275 other people who had just went through some tremendous events, a shipwreck and everything. And they're finally ashore and they land on an island called Malta. So this is Acts chapter 28. You'll find that the book of Acts is written in the third person by the author. The author was Dr. Luke. Dr. Luke was a friend of Paul's, and he was on the trip with him. Yes, the same Luke that wrote the book of Luke also wrote the book of Acts, which is more formally known as the Acts of the Apostles, because he's talking about different apostles of Yahshua. So Luke, also sometimes known as Saint Luke, was a Gentile. He was not a Jew. He was not of Judah. He was not a Hebrew. He was not an Israelite. He was a Gentile. He was also a physician. That's why I called him Dr. Luke. And quite possibly was a native of Greece because of his excellent Greek speaking and writing and understanding of the Greek language. And I'm going to read from verses 1 through 10. So it says, "Once safely on shore, we found out that the island was called Malta. The islanders showed us unusual kindness. They built a fire and welcomed us, all because it was rainy and cold. Paul gathered a pile of brushwood, and as he put it on the fire, a viper, driven out by the heat, fastened itself on his hand. When the islanders saw the snake hanging from his hand, they said to each other, 'This man must be a murderer. For though he escaped from the sea, the goddess Justice has not allowed him to live.' Now these were Gentiles who did not know who Yahshua was. They worshipped idols. They had an idol goddess, gods. You see, they're saying Justice, a goddess Justice. So they didn't know Yahshua. They were unfamiliar with who Paul serves. But Paul served Yahshua, and he knew Psalm 91. He knew Psalm 91 and 13. You will trample upon lions and cobras. You will crush fierce lions and serpents under your feet. And just like Yahshua said back there in John 14 and 12, we see here in verse 5, Paul shook the snake off into the fire and suffered no ill effects. You shall do the same works as Yahshua, even greater works, because Yahshua is going to be with his Father, Yahuwah. But these Gentiles didn't know this. They expected him to swell up or suddenly fall dead. But after waiting a long time and seeing nothing unusual happen to him, they changed their minds and said he was a god. Now, they worship gods and goddesses, so they didn't know any better at the time. But you already know how Paul worked. You already know how he rolled. Before he left that island, I can guarantee you, they were believers of Yahshua. Verse 7, there was an estate nearby that belonged to Publius, the chief official of the island. He welcomed us to his home and showed us generous hospitality for 3 days. His father was sick in bed, suffering from fever and dysentery. Dysentery is inflammation of the lower extremities of the body. Paul went in to see him, and after prayer, placed his hands on him and healed him. When this had happened, the rest of the sick on the island came and were cured. Just like I said, you know good and well, Paul was not going to leave that island without them folks knowing Yahshua. They knew Yahshua because they believed and they were healed. This is a fact. And I don't know if you caught that, but it said the rest of the island. It didn't say it was naysayers. It didn't say it was people trying to get Paul and his people off the island. It said the rest of the sick on the island came and were cured. They all believed. And they honored them in many ways. And when they were ready to set sail, they furnished them with supplies as needed. And you see, this is an example of what Yahshua was talking about. You shall do all the things that he did, even more things, because he was going with his father, Yahuwah. There's one thing that I'd like to point out, the people of Malta. Shout out to Malta. Whoop, whoop. Mark 6:4, Yahshua said this. He said, a prophet is honored everywhere except in his own hometown, among his relatives and his own family. This is proof. Paul and all the people with him were treated like royalty. They left with gifts. Those people on Malta didn't know those folk, all those 275, 76 folk, from a can of paint. But they still treated them with kindness. And you see all the miracle signs and wonders that Paul was able to perform in Yahshua's name. He was able to prevent himself from being canceled because of a snake. He was able to pray for and heal the sick, all the sick on the whole island of Malta, in Yahshua's name. All of these things we can do in Yahshua's name. All the stuff that he did when he was here, and even more things, because he is with the Father. Surrender and give yourself to Yahshua. Keep your eyes on Yahshua. You don't know the power. You don't know the things that he has given you. If our people Israel knew the things that the Father gave us, Yahuwah gave us in Yahshua's name, all the abilities that we had, the stuff that we've been going through on this earth, going all the way back to Deuteronomy 28, we probably would not have done this stuff. We wouldn't be going through some of the things that we're going through now. People need to wake up and keep their eyes on Yahshua. Israelites, my fellow Hebrews, keep your eyes on Yahshua. He will give you wisdom, knowledge, and understanding. Wake up and things can shift. Things can turn around. There's nothing too hard for Yahuwah. Period.